Welcome back to another sunny day in Thailand. It's starting to be high season and the weather is beautiful and the tourists are flocking in. Now, I've had taken a bit of a break for a couple of weeks. I went on a little mini holiday to another beach town in Thailand. Did a lot of thinking about this stuff and thought of a couple of areas to pursue. I also got extremely helpful information from a guy called Shaky Traveler. That's his user ID on YouTube. And he sent me some great schematics that shows me things that should work and shouldn't work that will help me drive this project forward. So let's go take a look at what he sent.
Okay, this diagram shows what we both believe is the major failure of my circuit, and that is I'm exceeding the maximum differential input voltage, not just of two of the inputs, like from here to here or here to here, but the whole top to bottom. And as soon as I put two 21700s in the circuit, I'm up around 8.4 volts, and I'm only allowed to go to 6.144. That's why one cell works and two cells fails. Okay, let's check the next thing. His next chart says that I cannot have a negative input pin voltage by putting the ground in the center, because that makes this ground less than that ground. That's no good, but we're okay here because I'm not attempting to do that. I really don't have the concept of ground here because I'm in a 6-cell series battery circuit. There should be one ground at the most negative terminal. So this one's okay. And in the same way, this next one worries me a bit because he says this won't work because these are ungrounded, and whereas this input here should be the same relative ground signal as the analog reading chip. So I don't think I'm bad here because I do have a negative at the bottom of the most negative cell. Okay, then he's supplied two that should work. This one should work, but he's got the two negatives of the cells in common driving the center reading, and you're taking a reading from the top here with a common ground. But that doesn't work with the topology of my battery pack, so I can't even attempt to use this solution. And this next one, he says, should also work but have increased accuracy because I'm actually using discrete inputs of 0 to 1 and 2 to 3 as I've been using. But again, the two of the battery cells are common on their negative terminal, which is not my topology. Now I'm starting to get really worried because if this is essentially an impossible task for this chip due to the nature of the way it reads its differential voltages with respect to ground, some theoretical ground, and a maximum input voltage, maybe I just can't read 6 cells that are in series. So I did a lot of Google searching. Some people are trying to do the same thing I am, but I haven't had a definitive, a really good answer. So then I started thinking, maybe I have to abandon this and go with some other hardware solution. So I started finding blogs like this one that talk about a whole chip that's a dedicated battery management system on a chip, this LTC6802. It can handle up to 12 battery cells, plus it manages the bleed-off resistors, which is exactly the same thing I'm trying to do, but I'm trying to do it only with 6 cells. But you have to drive this with an Arduino, so it's not an entire microcontroller itself. It's kind of a dumb chip that needs to be driven across an SPI bus. And you can see this guy's got a prototype board and he's wired it all up and he's got his Arduino, and there's sample code, which is wonderful, but there's a lot of configuration stuff you have to push to this BMS chip, and then you've got to drive it and tell it what to do, and it just seems vastly overcomplicated for what I'm looking for. But then I found the spec sheet for the chip, and this is in more detail, 12 cells plus the bleed resistors, and there are 34 pages just to describe the chip, much less understanding how to program it. There's another chip in the family, the 6804 series, which I believe is simply a monitor without the bleeding capability. So that could be a little simpler. Again, I think it handles 12 cells, but still, it's more complex than I need or that I want. And here's the data sheet for the 6804 family. Measures 12 battery cells with an SPI interface. And I guess I could do this, because all I really want to do is monitor it, and then I want to drive it with my own bleeding technology. But let's try one thing before I get to this state.
So we're back here with the test setup. Everything's wired up, all cells 1 through 6 going. I'm not running the relays to drive the draining resistors, but I do have 6 AA batteries set in here, but they're too short for the 21700 holders, so to actually make them work, I have to put a socket in there in order to make contact. So let's go through and we'll see what happens as I add more batteries to the system.
Since I was having problems with the voltage of the 21700s up at 4.2, a good way to check my theory that I was just overdriving the maximum voltage of the chip is to run the system, but with some AA batteries that are about 1.5 to 1.6 volts. So that should give me a few cells before I trip over that voltage level. And I'm just doing this just to prove the functionality of having 3 of these boards in parallel with 6 battery cells in parallel. So let's take a look and see how that works. Okay, I'm going to start putting these cells into the circuit. The first one is a 1.497 volt cell in slot number 1. And there she is. Next one is a 1.539 cell in battery slot number 2. And there she is. Notice the 1.499 didn't change. Maybe it's gone up 1,000. That's bouncing around a little bit. Now I'm going to put a third cell in. It's a 1.570 volt cell. There it is. That's 3 thousandths low, but the other ones are staying rock solid. Now, here's our problem. I'm going to put the 4th cell into place. We are now at a cumulative total cell voltage of 4.606. If I put the 1.626 volt cell into battery space number 4, we're going to be at 6.232, which is above 6.144. Watch what happens. Number 3 is now negative. Let me just fix that. Okay, I fixed number 3. But you can see number 1 dropped down, number 2 dropped down a little bit, number 3, number 4 is only reading 0.421 volts. We are over the limit of the chip, even though our total battery is 6.232 volts across 2 of the boards and across 4 analog differential input channels. We're still hitting this brick wall. Okay, I'm going to take out cell number 4, and everything goes back to normal. Now I'm going to show you something weird. I'm going to put in battery number 5, but I'm going to leave battery number 4 alone. Battery number 5 is 1.625 volts. Here we go. Battery number 5 is showing 1.618, and the other ones are staying right about the same. We are now over our maximum system voltage, but since I've left a gap in number 4, it seems to have allocated itself negative 1.1 volts, but is still reading fine. Now let me put battery cell number 6 in the circuit, which is 1.624 volts. It's reading 1.618, and all the other voltages stayed the same, but number 4 is now showing negative 2.5 on an open circuit. We're now way over the 6.144 volt limit, but it seems to be trying to offset that by some kind of phantom negative voltage on cell number 4. That's weird. So here's just a little rant. If you're reading the spec sheet for this chip or this board, you think you've got 2 independent differential voltage inputs on each board. And you should be able to put multiple of these boards in the same circuit, but each of the pair of differential inputs should be able to read some arbitrary voltage which is less than 6.144 volts, which is, I mean, every chip's going to have a maximum, and I can live with that. But what you don't find out until you really understand their spec sheet or actually use it in a circuit is that each channel is not independent. Each channel depends on all the other channels that are wired up. And if you want to use both of the channels on a single board, the sum of those 2 voltages had better be less than 6.144, not each one. And if you've got 3 boards in the circuit with 6 inputs, they had better be less than 1 volt each. Right up around 1 volt's the maximum you're going to be able to get per input without overdriving their magic system. And this is one thing that bugs me about both hardware and software people. When they're designing a product, they pretty much design it to be easy to make for them. The trade-offs, the guys that made this chip, or these ladies, is fine. The trade-offs that they made to make this chip is not truly independent differential input channels. They are interconnected in a way that makes the chip less usable than what their marketing would initially tell you. It's the same thing with the Android API. If you want to write an app for your Android phone, it's a nightmare because the people who wrote the Android operating system and the library that you get to program against made it easy for themselves, not for you. And I can go back all the way through my career, and I've got endless examples of this. When you're designing something, you need to make it easy for the person to use it for its intended purpose. If you say, hey, I've got 2 channels of differential input, and you better make sure you're less than 6.144 volts, that's what people are going to look at. Not the fine print that says, oh, well, if you want to put a bunch of these, you've only got a volt to work with on each input. That's just not right. Anyway, end of my rant, and I'm off to buy some resistors so I can start dividing by 5 on each of my inputs. As you stare out on my beach, I would ask you to subscribe to my channel and click like on this video so YouTube thinks I'm worthy again, and I have so many people on my channel that they'll give me 10 cents a day in ad revenue. So I thank you for that.